we've hit a magical 1 minute past the hour, so I think we'll slowly kick off. Perhaps we'll have some folks come in after the coffee and join us along the way. We've got plenty to talk about, so we can roll right into our conversation. This is the session on future-proofing business, the integrity advantage of ESG. Today, among other things, we're going to talk about anti-corruption, corporate governance, business integrity, and ESG. Along the way, we'll have an introduction to the UNGC's transformational governance concept and corporate toolkit, and we'll also hear how that fits into the mix around ESG. It's very fitting that we're going to talk about the UNGC's transformational governance concept because this year, 2024, is the 20th anniversary of the 10th principle of the UN Global Compact. So those of us who've been around in this field for that long, who can raise their hand? Remember when that principle was agreed? We're deeply, I think, shaped by its addition to the UNGC family, and we know that it's been a driving force of engagement with the business community since then. So congratulations to UNGC and to all of us who've been working with the 10th principle. My name is Robin Hodis. I'm the strategy lead at the B Team. For those of you who don't know the B Team is an initiative of business and civil society leaders who about a decade ago got together and decided that they wanted to be ambitious and progressive on the most important policy issues of the day, focusing on governance, focusing on climate and on nature and on inclusion. And so the B Team's been working together to try to show leadership in the business community, both in word and deed. ESG. It's an area of financial reporting by companies that reflects broadly on environmental, social, and government risks. Some would say it reflects on impact as well, or it should. There has been a huge amount of hype, of hope, and hand-wringing about ESG. The hype, I would say, is around the market for ESG. Investment in ESG has boomed. It surpassed $30 trillion assets under management last year. It's set to reach $40 trillion by 2030. That'll be managed in ESG funds and exchange-traded funds. That's more than 25% of the about $140 trillion assets under management, according to Bloomberg Intelligence. This is a big, big hype. ESG also represents hope. Hope because progressive business leaders, activists, new economic thinkers have felt that ESG and the risk assessments associated with it and the reporting requirements will help reshape business, will help us to make business align people, planet, purpose, profit, and drive toward that triple bottom line and the stakeholder governance and stakeholder economy. And anti-corruption certainly as a part of that. So we had hype, we had hope, and we have hand-wringing. Like all issues, when they become hyped, there's also a bit of hand-wringing at some point because the skeptics come along. So what's happened for the companies involved with ESG? It's the reporting. It's the alphabet soup of reporting. We have GRI, CSRD, CSDDD, the TCFD, the TNFD, the SBTI, the ISSB. I'm just beginning. Some of you can name more of them. So there's, of course, this concern, what do you want us to do next? How do we report on all these things meaningfully? Meaningful reporting, right? But there's also pushback coming from, if you want to say, activists left and right. Those maybe more conservative would say, ESG, this is just a political plot to throw capitalism out the window. It's going to throw capitalism off course, and capitalism won't work with this nonsense approach attached to it. On the left, you could say, or more progressive, would say ESG, this is washing, all that greenwashing and washing. It's companies ticking the box in shiny reports without really demonstrating the impact on business practice, or on society. To look at the role of integrity in ESG, to discuss and dissect the hype, the hope, and the hand-wringing, I am joined by an amazing panel. So we'll hear from them through a few rounds of questions. The first one will broadly explore ESG and corporate governance more widely, as well as the role of integrity in it. And the second round will look a little bit more at how governance integrity contribute to anti-corruption. And then we'll have some time for audience questions. So, the panelists. I'm here with Christina Ritter, the head of governance and anti-corruption at the UN Global Compact. A big welcome to Christina. I'm here to my immediate left, Rano Hoffman, the global head of corporate compliance and management systems at Novartis. Welcome, Rano. Mohammed Mohan, the president of Transparency International Malaysia. Welcome. And Nicola Aloca, who has a very long title, Risk, Business Integrity, Resilience, and Quality Director at Autostrade per l'Italia. And Nicola, you also have some roles at business at the OECD, leading the Anti-Corruption Committee. So a big welcome to Nicola. Christina, we're going to go right to you first, because we mentioned this concept around transformational governance. You've put forward this really broad corporate governance concept. Can you tell us more about it, how it relates to ESG, and how specifically does it expand the G in ESG?
Thank you, Robin. Okay. So, thank you for having me here. Welcome to our panel. Maybe I should start by explaining what the UN Global Compact is before I even mention transformational governance, in case you're not familiar with it. So the UN Global Compact, in a nutshell, I would say it's the United Nations agency that works with the private sector. But we're also the largest corporate sustainability initiative in the world, with over 25,000 companies in 170 countries, I believe. And we have country networks in 60 places to implement all of our efforts on the ground. So these companies have committed to 10 principles on human rights, environment, labor, and anti-corruption. Principle 10 is precisely anti-corruption. And so we support these companies in advancing those principles, but also in advancing the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs around that agenda. So transformational governance, the best way I could describe it, I think, would be a merge between traditional governance, this corporate governance, good corporate governance, compliance, with sustainable governance, and then global governance. So I will explain each of these three, because that's what we ask from our companies. We ask them to go one step beyond traditional governance with its typical internal measures to also address the impact that they will have in societies, in the environment, and finally to contribute to the ecosystem where they work, to contribute to peace, justice, and strong institutions. So let's start with what is corporate governance or good corporate governance. So we know that all the processes, mechanisms, and strategies that a company puts in place to operate effectively, that is governance. When we add the principles of transparency, integrity, and accountability, that would be good governance. Those three principles, in fact, are the three principles of anti-corruption according to the UN Convention Against Corruption. So there's a clear link right there between governance and anti-corruption, or good governance and anti-corruption, right? So we want to take it a step further, like I said, and now think about being sustainable, being inclusive. We want to think about diversity. So all of these corporate sustainability issues that are in ESG, in the E, in the S, and then expand our governance to also cover those, to also address those risks associated with those two key issues, and then mitigate them. And then the third step would be to even go further and contribute, like I was saying before, to public institutions, to legal frameworks, and the systems of the ecosystem where the company operates. And for this, I think from the UN Global Compact, we have a very important role in facilitating that companies can have a role, can have a voice at that level, because obviously it's not simple. And the approach that we mainly promote for this is collective action. There are also other means to do it, but collective action is very close to our heart. It's our forte. We've been working on that for 15 years. We even launched a playbook on the methodology to conduct collective action, and we think it's the best way, effective way to work hand in hand with the government on this issue. So I've covered the 3 types of governance. Now I can quickly maybe say, or look at it from an internal, external, and collective point of view, because that is how, again, we require companies to work against corruption. So internally, good governance, like I said before, starts with a risk management approach, of course, then the mitigation strategy, the policies that you put in place, the code of conduct, the training, communications, incentives, internal controls, addressing violations, reporting channels, and whistleblower protection. Those are your typical internal actions. Externally, we require companies to work with their supply chain. So whether that is through due diligence before even entering the partnership, the business partnership, and then once you've entered the relationship, also incentivize them, also bring them into your training and communication efforts so that they can take part of your business integrity values. Finally, collectively, I already mentioned that collective action, thanks to the Siemens Integrity Initiative, I see Sean here, we've managed to work with many countries around the world. Collective action is when like-minded stakeholders come together with some concrete objectives in mind to tackle an identified corruption challenge, for example, and they work together towards it. It could be from the private sector alone, or it can bring in civil society, governments, academia, and currently we're supporting 20 local networks around the world to implement that collective action. And again, for me, it's the best way you can achieve transformational governance at that level.
Thank you so much. I hope we're going to be able to dig into those different levels and those different applications of the concept. And Rano, I want to give the floor to you next to ask you maybe respond to that challenge of those different levels around transformational governance and give us a sense of how inside Novartis, how do you address broader corporate governance elements like human rights, like diversity and inclusion, stakeholder engagement? How does that play a role in pursuing a culture of integrity?
Thank you, Robin. First of all, it's a great pleasure to be here and be part of this discussion, very important discussion about ESG and the benefits also for companies. I would start by stating that companies currently operate in an area that is marked by climate change, by economic instabilities, by social inequalities. And the big question, and basically what Christina is raising is, do the traditional governance models that focus on short-term profit sufficient enough to help companies navigate through those difficult times? And this also in the context that basically I think we agree all that it's not enough anymore if a company is profitable. It is expected that companies are good corporate citizens, and they need to demonstrate that they are, demonstrating through their environmental awareness, demonstrating through their ethical behavior, and demonstrating to other good or sound corporate governance principles. And you mentioned a few. I would, again, for me, it's about fairness, it's about transparency, it's about responsibility, it's about accountability, it's about risk management. Those are the principles. They are not new, but I think they have been elevated in the last few years and got maybe a different perspective. So in this context, I think I would answer my own question. I think the very traditional governance models are not sufficient anymore. But the concept that Christina outlined, I think it's quite appealing. And I can also give you some examples of justification where I think it's a good approach. And the first one is when you think of corporate governance, a main pillar is leadership, tone from the top. It's a main critical element. And leadership is associated with the question of good leadership. And today, good leadership means ethical leadership. So when we talk about ethical leadership and companies and their leaders, when they kind of role model ethics, they set a very strong standard within the organization. When companies live up to their commitment of integrity, they will shape the values of an organization. They will shape the culture. They will shape all the processes Christina mentioned before, which are relevant for good decision making. And with this, they also encourage associates to do the same. And when associates apply this and act ethically, so basically then they follow the principle and they create an environment, or together, with leaders, they create an environment where doing the right thing becomes the new norm, which is important. And secondly, another pillar for me, and which is also at the core of a good governance model that you outlined, Christina, is transparency and accountability. If a company is open, and this is expected nowadays, open and honest to their own associates, but also to external stakeholders, this will build trust. And this is the foundation for long-term success. And when we talk about long-term success, immediately you come to the question about sustainability. Companies cannot ignore anymore their responsibility towards, or let's say the impact that they have on the environment, the impact that they have on the societies, because they also benefit from. And therefore, sustainability has to be a core element of the strategic planning and of the operations. I do not say that this is easy. It is difficult, in particular when we talk about supply chain, but this should not lead to the fact that it will be ignored. Instead, I feel when sustainability becomes a core element, I think it drives innovation. It, at the same time, enables a better risk management, because you need to acknowledge and talk to your stakeholders, external stakeholders. You get different perspectives. And this brings me to another topic that you highlighted with the global part, that you have different stakeholders. The moment a company includes the perspective of different stakeholders, values their opinions and understand the needs, then they not only will become more successful because they understand the societal expectation and the ethical components. No, I think also their products and actions are more aligned and become much more better. So I'm from a pharmaceutical industry, and I think you all would agree that you cannot produce and develop medicine without the involvement of patients. Patients are stakeholders, but you can translate this in a much wider horizon. And quickly to the other points on human rights. And I think also we should not forget diversity and inclusion. And the moment a company demonstrates a commitment to human rights, it becomes clear that they feel responsible and accountable. And this builds trust, and trust is a key element to maintain a culture of integrity. And when a company fosters an environment of inclusion and diversity, then you create a workplace that is characterized by respect and by innovation. And we all know when you have teams, when you work with teams, you probably have the same. Where you have different people with different background, different cultures, you get different perspective, which maybe, short term seem to be a little bit complicated, but mid and long term, you have a much more successful problem-solving process, a much more successful decision-making process, and it would also lead to ethical decisions. So just to basically close to say that the model, the transformational governance model, is something that, in my view, clearly also supports a culture of integrity in an organization.
Yeah, it begins to feel like there's a whole set of roots taking hold, from good governance and transformational governance to support other sustainability trends inside the company. And Nicola, I want to turn to you now, because I think with also the many hats that you wear and then working at OECD, you've got your finger on the pulse of a lot of these challenges to ESG. And I'd ask you, Rauno spoke a lot from how this plays out inside the company, but what are the main ESG challenges that are facing business more generally? What are some of the new geopolitical risks that you see, and what do they hold ahead for the business environment for anti-corruption inside companies?
Thank you, Robin. Thank you for having me today. And I would like to thank, first of all, Transparency International and the UN Global Compact and all the stakeholders involved in making this event happen. It is really important to talk about these topics. As a representative of the business at OECD and senior executive of one of the biggest players in Europe belonging to the infrastructure industry, I can say that businesses need to develop a long-term vision which take into consideration both planet challenges and opportunities. In this regard, corruption is the challenge, but zero corruption is the opportunity. It is clear that we need an urgent action plan, and we could call it switch to growth that cover what Rauno said regarding the long-term success for corporation. It can strengthen the real economy in this volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, liquid, and modern world. On this, I will go straight to the point. Corporations should trace the compliance footprint within their strategic industrial plan in order to set compliance KPIs with the same importance as the performance KPIs and link them to the management MBO. So this is a practical, a concrete example. In the last 25 years, I have implemented internal control systems and anti-corruption models in complex contexts, in M&Es, in small and medium enterprises, in SOEs, facing cultural and sometimes criminal barriers. And I can honestly say that in these years, OECD, Transparency International, UN Global Compact principles and standards helped me in implementing sound anti-corruption measures. So thank you very much, guys, for the work and the job you do, because in the private sector, we need you working on it and give us the right direction. I would like to give you a concrete example on how we have applied these principles in Autostrade per l'Italia. As I said, Autostrade per l'Italia is one of the biggest motorway operators in Europe. And 4 years ago, we started a transformation program characterized by a huge amount of investment, a very large amount of investment, in order to strengthen our infrastructure and become an integrated operator of sustainability, sustainable mobility. And to face this challenge, we defined a specific program called the Next to Legality inside our strategic plan. The program is based on OECD, UN, and Transparency International standards and best practices. And there are 3 main pillars for this program. The first is to adopt a responsible business conduct. It's a sort of transformational governance. For us, this means that profit generated outside ethical boundaries cannot be considered as profit anymore. This means that there is no trade-off between performance and compliance, results and rules, business and values. This means that corporations should evaluate their actions not only from an economic and financial point of view, but also considering the social impact of these actions in the context where they happen. The second pillar is zero tolerance against misalignment. No shortcuts is our motto. But the third pillar is the use of artificial intelligence in compliance. This is the biggest challenge and opportunity. For example, thanks to AI, we are able to implement continuous monitoring solution in the procure-to-pay process, analyzing 100% of available relevant data, providing real-time results to the management in order to improve the decision-making process. We applied this approach also on our third parties in order to stabilize the supply chain, which is impacted by the geopolitical risk. So supply chain stabilization is one of the main target challenges for corporations in order to stabilize also the value chain. And for example, we are able to analyze 100% of our suppliers using also AI solutions which are able to predict if in the next 5 years the supplier will have financial or compliance issues. So just to come to a conclusion, I would like to say that as a business as a B2N Integrated Compliance Task Force, on which I have the honor to serve as co-chair, we have identified 4 main priorities that perfectly match with the ESG challenges. So the first one is regarding the standardization of ESG data. The second is related on the use of ethical leadership, what Rauno just said. And the third one is on green corruption. And the fourth one is on the mental health. That is one of the biggest issues that we have to face in our day-to-day job. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicola, also for uplifting the B20 work. Some really large topics. Just to repeat what you said, I think both the use of AI, very, very interesting. I'd be curious who in the room is also working with artificial intelligence in the course of their work. We've got a few hands up. I think it'll be great to hear a little bit more about that, about the way it lends to predictability and certainty, but also put some risks out there regarding rights. And thank you for your leadership. Mohammed, TI Malaysia, can you give us a perspective from civil society that I know knows business and understands business? How does strong integrity culture enable business to address ESG? What are the incentives? What are the disincentives that are there for companies to take on ESG reporting?
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thank you to UN Global Compact as well as Transparency International for giving me this opportunity to be here. So on the issue of culture of integrity, basically, as what Rauno has said, it's about tone at the top. I mean, if it is a new setup and if you are leading it, it could be much easier. But many of us don't have that luxury. You could be taking over a company where the culture has already been set. Now you're going to change those things. So culture, tone at the top is very, very key. And I just want to give you an example of my own self. If you have read my profile, I was once a whistleblower, and I became a witness for the anti-corruption agency in Malaysia, and I became a witness for them in a court trial for about 10 years. Now the question is, after I've left the company, I was still on the case and so on. The question is, why do you want to do this? And mind you, at that time, this happened about 20 years ago, and there was no whistleblower protection, no witness protection. So when you go to court, you actually have to see the accused, and the accused knows who is the one who actually blew the whistle. Now the question is, why do I do this? Even I didn't realize this. Only years later, I reflect back and I said, why did you do this? And I think I got the answer then. It's because how you were brought up. And I was very fortunate in the organization that I was in. Culture of integrity was already built in when I started my career. So it's very much to do with leadership. So we're talking about ethical leadership and tone at the top and so on. That's how it should start. All right. Now the other thing here is when you have a culture of integrity in the organization, you will find that everything will fall in its place. There's alignment. In other words, any initiatives that you do, you find that employees will find their path very much easily. There will be a lot of collaboration and so on. And like what Christina mentioned just now, that the third stage you're going where you engage with the supply chain and so on. So this becomes easier. So there is a lot of strategic alignment and collaboration happening when you have culture of integrity built in the organization. Now the other thing is, when you talk about risk management and transparency, we heard about that just now, transparency. So it will cut across the organization. When you have culture of integrity built in the organization, managing risk becomes a very normal thing in the whole organization. Whether you are in marketing, whether you are in finance, whether you are in strategy or in compliance, it's very easy to push through when you want to manage risk assessment. Everyone will fall in place very easily. Now, of course, the other thing is value creation. If you have good reporting system with a good culture of integrity, good reporting system, the reputation of your organization builds up. So you create value in that sense. And the fourth thing, will be ethical decision making. We heard that just now. So in that process, when you find that when you have culture of integrity in the organization, when decisions are made, it's done even at a lower level, very ethically. Employees will think there is no need to follow up or and so on. Of course, you can check on them, but they know what to do themselves. That is the beauty of building a culture of integrity in the organization. On the second part of these incentives of for ESG, among the disincentives of ESGs is number one is cost. Now, especially to implement this, there is always a cost to it because we are doing it at midway. Although ESG is not something new for organization. Issue of environment, issue of social, issue of governance is already been there. But today with the push for ESG, many organizations find that cost is an element. So that is why the resistance is there, especially if you see and talk to the SMEs. However, the consequences of not doing that, it can be even more severe, which is something that we have to actually advocate and explain this. So this is one disincentive we have. Now, the other thing is, which I will elaborate more later, is the reporting. Now, we said that we had this, UN Global Compact has first introduced these principles, and then we have the GRI, and then you have the other private groups, Morgan Stanley Composite Index, Bloomberg. They all have come up with different frameworks. So you find that today that when you compare reports, you can't compare. So it is not standard. So sometimes because of this, it turns off people who want to actually implement ESG. Now the other factor also is to do with greenwashing, which was just mentioned just now, where organizations try to deceive by saying that the product qualifies as a green product, but actually it doesn't qualify. So when newcomers realize this, when there is this called greenwashing, or they didn't report exactly what they are supposed to report, then you find that this is a disincentive. New players will come. So what? People can just manipulate and so on. So these are three factors actually disincentive for these things. Now the last part that you are raising the question about sustainable corporate governance, how do we maintain this? And when you have sustainable corporate governance, what are the benefits? First of all, you have created a situation of transparency in the organization, all right, and accountability. And this is a very big problem. Whether it's a public sector, academia, private sector, you find that many get away with murder. There is no accountability. Even in the country where I come from, in Malaysia, year after year, Auditor General's report will show there is billions lost in terms of non-implementation of the project, or there's leakages in the system. But who is accountable? Nobody is punished for that. So these are kind of things that actually will help if you have a sustainable governance in any organization. And the other thing is, to have sustainable governance, is to have anti-corruption practices implemented in the organization. You need to have programs, various programs in the organization. And that actually can build investor confidence. So that's the fourth one. And of course, risk management and stakeholders' trust need to be there. Now, with all that in place, then you can say your governance is sustainable. All right? So maybe I'll stop here for the moment, and later I will add on.
No, thank you for that tour de table of both the incentives, the investor push, etc., the disincentives, the costs, the reporting, and the risk of greenwashing. And I think it's a good segue to spend another round of questions, a little bit focused now on how this integrity culture, accountability culture, can help specifically with anti-corruption programs. What are the benefits we see within companies, and what kinds of new tools are there out there? So Christina, first to you, because I think you're the creator of tools, you and your team. So what are the tools and approaches and strategies? You've talked about collective action, but more specifically, are there other new tools or approaches that you're going to suggest to the panel and to the room about business integrity and to help with corporate sustainability more widely?
Yes, of course, and I'm happy to hear that at least one person uses our tools. I'm sure more do. So maybe I can talk about the transformational governance toolkit. This was launched this year, so it's a very new and very practical tool for you. But maybe I should take a step back and first remind you, the UN Global Compact supports the companies internally, externally, and collectively to advance our Principle 10 on anti-corruption, and in the case of our unit, the anti-corruption and governance, also the SDG 16. Those two are the basis of our mandate and our portfolio. So SDG 16 is on peace, justice, and strong institutions. I know because we are anti-corruption fighters here, we might be very familiar with this, but for companies, it's not that evident. This is the SDG that actually is the less understood by business, I would say, but it's maybe the most consequential to its operations, and I will tell you why. So first, because when those three factors are in place, we can then advance and make progress towards sustainable development. And second, because they are the pillars to a safe, sustainable environment, economically speaking, where precisely companies and investors can thrive. So just think about it. Peace, justice, strong institutions. If you're a company and you have to worry about safety of your employees, if you have to worry about legal certainty, about extortion, being requested or bribe to get your license to operate, and every step that you take, you cannot work properly. When you don't have to focus about that because those three pillars are in place, you can then really focus on what's important: development, innovation, generating income, jobs, really supporting the economy of the country. So SDG 16, we decided, okay, the targets are not that obvious to companies, but we will translate it for them. So in 2021, we came up with the SDG 16 business framework, where we translate each one of the targets of SDG 16. Some of them are related to corruption, precisely, to bribery, illicit financial flows, children exploitation, so to what it means for companies, what they can do about it. But last year, we went one step further and we created a Think Lab. A Think Lab is a delivery channel of the UN Global Compact when we bring leading companies together that are strong in this thematic area, about 25, and for a year, we work with them through consultations to really innovate in a specific topic. In this case, it was to operationalize transformational governance. So we did that through last year. And recently in February, we launched the result of that work, which consists of 3 issue briefs. One on the engagement with governments responsibly, another one on investment or investors in the context of ESG, and the third one on the role of the board. But I think the star, the really highlight of the Transformational Governance Toolkit, which is available on our website, is the self-assessment tool. So that one is pretty much an online questionnaire that you can complete, and it will tell you where your company is in its transformational governance journey, but with very precise scoring and feedback. You get spider diagrams about internal and external actions that you are taking on specific SDG 16 targets, and you get also specific guidance. In the end, you get a tailor-made for you guidance on how to improve on each one of these specific targets. So that is available. It's anonymous, it's free, it's on our website, so you can, of course, take the test. And for us at the UN Global Compact, we can monitor the results, and that is very useful for our programming to know exactly where the gaps are and when we can maybe focus our capacity building efforts. So this is, again, to support companies more like internally and also externally through the actions that they can take. But as I said before, transformational governance in motion is also about the impact that companies have on their ecosystem externally. And I believe that that as the UN Global Compact, our role, because we are that bridge between governments, UN, companies, we can facilitate and act as moderators, bringing the voice of business to those dialogues when they can really have a say and make a difference. So last year, what we did was to develop a call to action in September at our Leaders Summit, which is a flagship event of the UN Global Compact, a call to action from business to governments. The call to action focused on 5 key points. It was a one-page, high-level document. First, collective action. Second, incentives. Also, the incorporation of more corporate sustainability criteria in government decision-making processes. Very important. That goes hand in hand with incentives. Another point that business wanted governments to emphasize their efforts was on education, and finally on AI, governance, and technologies. So those were the 5, and we took that call to action. In the end, it was open for signatures for about 2 months, and during that time, it was signed by companies from 91 countries around the world, and we presented that in December at the conference of the state parties of the UN Convention Against Corruption. Our CEO, Sandao Jambo, presented at the plenary. Also, we co-hosted with UNODC the first private sector forum inside a conference of state parties to the UN Convention Against Corruption. With it, well, I mean, you all know, it's the anti-corruption COP. Everyone is always familiar with the climate COP, not so much with the anti-corruption COP, but I think this audience knows. So it was the first time that we had a significant presence of private sector inside a COP, discussing priorities, challenges, trends, and solutions with governments, and something really wonderful happened. We received a direct response from governments. So a resolution was adopted on incentives. That resolution recognized both our call to action and the private sector forum, so it wasn't a coincidence. And this resolution now gives us, enables us to knock on government's door at the country level and say, let's work together to make this happen, to develop incentives that could be effective to incentivize or implement, adopt business integrity. So that's what we've done at the global level, also to support companies externally. And am I forgetting anything? I have so much to say. Okay, we also advocated for the reestablishment of the B20 Task Force on Integrity and Compliance. And I'm really happy that it was reestablished by Brazil. And those priorities that you mentioned are so important. And if you see, they are in line with the call to action, with the resolution. And I guess the ESG part of it, the corporate sustainability, the transformational governance that goes beyond traditional compliance, you can see it in how today compliance officers or other functions that are involved in good governance are having to deal with more topics. The mental health topic in the workplace was a theme that we were all kind of surprised to see. But I remember last year I went to the meeting of WEFPACHI, the annual one, and it came up because compliance officers were saying, now through our reporting channels, we're receiving so many complaints of harassment, discrimination, and now we have to deal with this. So it's part of building, ultimately, a culture of integrity with strong ethical leadership, as you were saying, and going beyond what is legal to what is right. And that is what transformational governance is all about. Thank you.
Christina, from legal to what's right, that's a brilliant way to end. And I think we can all acknowledge that the UNGC has been a veritable hub of activity then in terms of the tools, the outreach, etc. Nicola, it'd be great to hear how you see that external reach, the incentives piece and the resolution fitting in with the business at the OECD, because ultimately you're working inside a business. There's only so much time business can put into this. We should be aligning, I think, in terms of the expectations around government. And what I sense, Christina, is that there's a bit of an infectiousness that if business can do things better, they can demand more of government to do things better. And then we have a virtuous circle rising to the top. So thank you for that tour through both the internal tools and the external reach of the UNGC's work. Rano, I wanted to turn to you and ask a little bit about, how does this culture of integrity play out internally? There's always the classic issues around compliance, managing risk, reputational risk, legal risk, but how does it support other issues like relating to staff, recruitment, retention? Can you talk to a little bit the way the issues have played out for your work and your day-to-day in the company?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you, Robin. And I think Mohamed already nicely explained what a culture of integrity can do, which means basically building the bridge between kind of the standard and hard control elements of a compliance program, policies, controls, monitoring. But they are not always available, and associates not necessarily remember them. But then, when you have a culture of integrity, it becomes a natural and intrinsic motivation for associates to do the right thing. So thank you for this. And just to continue, I think a culture of integrity is fundamental to protect the reputation of a company, but also the legal standing. But for me, it's both. It's the culture of integrity, but also having a strong governance framework, as mentioned by Christina. They both go hand in hand. They both are interdependent, and they both influence each other. And that's why both are important, because we are living in a very, I would say, volatile business environment, and companies are more than ever, I'd say, vulnerable, to damages to their reputation and legal repercussions. And a small incidence of unethical behavior, irrespective whether this is a normal misconduct or it's a broader scandal related to corruption and bribery, will immediately spread around the globe through social media. But if the company, and I really believe in this, if a company has a track record of integrity and a culture of integrity, I think they can better manage the crisis, and they will potentially also reduce the damage and that is created by this crisis, simply because external stakeholders give the company, or it's more likely that they give a company the benefits of doubt. And when companies emphasize the importance of integrity naturally, and again, I can only echo what Mohamed said, automatically this reduces misconduct. And if misconduct is reduced, you automatically have less issues, less legal issues. And there are different studies out there. I see also, my friend and colleague, Daniel Malan, who also does research in this area, which basically confirms if a company emphasizes, have implemented a culture, they face less misconduct, but have higher reporting of misconduct, which means people feel safe, psychologically safe to speak up, which then is kind of a preventative mechanism to avoid to get into also legal struggles. And to your point in terms of staffing and attracting talents, in today's world, and in particular the new generation, they want to have more than just a good salary. They are looking for companies who basically have the same and share the same values and principles that they do. And if a company is known for their integrity, clearly this company is also more attractive to new talents. And once they are onboarded, it just basically continues. When they are onboarded and experience a culture of integrity, they also feel safe. They feel safe when there is an environment that fosters trust, fairness, and prioritizes ethical behavior. It's quite natural. And it will also, I think, creates a higher satisfaction with the job, which then leads to loyalty, and loyalty again leads to a lower fluctuation, so the turnover is reduced. And I also strongly believe that this is a kind of a fulfilling, this environment is fulfilling, and people get more engaged and more motivated because they are more happy. I can just say I discussed this last week with a colleague, a business colleague who was the leader in Region Europe, who left unfortunately Novartis, who said, look, make sure that your people are happy. Happy people will be more productive. And happy, it was not only about fun, it was also, increase the sense of belonging, increase the sense of purpose. These are the things that motivate and make people go the extra mile. And I hope with my examples, I also make quite clear that the culture of integrity is not only, for a very narrow sense, it's important for the entire organization to become successful, because it influences in a positive way the entire governance discussion that we have, decision making, risk management, any type of operations. And just to give you an example from Novartis, And I do not say that we are perfect. No company is perfect. Also, I want to make this clear. But we try hard and we do our best. Culture and a culture of integrity is not static. You have different cultures in organizations, in particular in multinational organizations. So that's why you need to constantly discuss and talk to people. What we are doing is we do an ethical baseline survey, like probably many other global companies, to understand what our people think, what our associates perceive as their culture. And only if you do this, basically you can create the right interventions to improve. So we ask our associates what they think about do they trust their colleagues? Do they trust their managers? Do they experience conflicting goals? Do they feel that they are psychologically safe to speak up? All those elements are collected through this survey. It will be evaluated and then given back to our country leadership teams. So basically to the business. Because the business ultimately is in the driver's seat. And there is a discussion happening then at the country level also about actions and initiatives to be taken in order to improve certain areas where we see there is potentially a gap to be really and to have the optimal culture.
So it sounds like we're in an era of a huge investment in well-being in the workplace, in psychological safety and inclusion, and seeing that as an investment in staff in the way you might have trained people up on their finance skills or other things in the past. This is a kind of real investment, and it's taking integrity way outside the compliance box and really mainstreaming it. Nicola, thinking about this business engagement more broadly, which Christina referenced, as did you, connecting corporate governance and anti-corruption efforts. What efforts do you think companies can take to contribute to the ecosystem, the broader ecosystem they're involved in?
So, you know that Business at OECD is a leading institution, is another leading institution in the fight against corruption with a network of more than 10 million corporations in over 55 countries. And as chair of its anti-corruption committee, I feel a great responsibility, and I think that we all have a solemn duty in fighting this global cross-cutting issue. We must face it together to assure a sustainable future and progress on long-term challenges. In this sense, I would like to draw your attention on two numbers, 2024 and 0. 2024, this year, is a critical year in the fight against corruption as the UN Principle 10 turns 10 years old, 20 years old, sorry, 20 years old. And also the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention turns 25 years old. So it could be an opportunity to change the way we think about corruption. And this brings us to the second number, 0. 0 is a value, 0 has a value, 0 must be a target as zero corruption. There is a European Parliament study that has calculated the impact of corruption on the EU GDP. So, if we are able to eliminate corruption only in Europe, we can eliminate hunger, provide drinking water globally, and assure healthcare standards to the poorest countries, and we still would have additional resources left. So, if we allow corruption to deprive the next generation of key resources such as education, healthcare, security and safety standards, environmental rights, social wellness, we will inflict an intolerable burden of inequality on our children. For this reason, we must have the courage to admit that it is possible to eliminate corruption and to give this target its proper dignity in the UN SDG agenda as a new SDG. Now, to translate this commitment into action, we have issued a manifesto that calls for the treatment of zero corruption as an 18th SDG. The manifesto is a multi-stakeholder paper that can be applied by public and private organizations, by business representatives and corporations. It is based on OECD, Transparency International, UN, best practices, principles, and standards. The manifesto puts forward the 10 key actions in order to build a more sustainable, resilient, and corruption-resistant global economy. We have clusterized these 10 actions in 3 main groups, which represent the essential dimensions of our race to zero. In the first group, we would like to change the way we think about corruption. This means that we have to break biases that corruption cannot be eliminated. This means that businesses should implement anti-corruption measures with the aim of eradicating and not just reducing the corruption risk. The second cluster is creating meaningful tools and taking impactful measures. This includes adopted responsible conduct, incentivize and protect the brave voices, promote the freedom of press. Thank you, IACC, for setting the tone and the importance on the press, because this is the only conference where I see a big part of the conference focused on vigilant media. Vigilant media is crucial to uncovering the truth and protect our society. Includes also tech for trust and transparency. The last cluster is how to act globally. So collective action is vital in order to build a responsible, sustainable, resilient business ecosystem, the business ecosystem that Christina mentioned, with zero corruption. Here, governments, businesses, civil society, international organizations must come together as equal partners in order to translate the global commitments into tangible results and level the playing field. In conclusion, Robbie, the manifesto forges an alliance between us and those who will come after us. And it is the basis for the hope that you said in the introduction. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. A manifesto for an 18th SDG. I think nobody thought we could even manage 17, but we've got 18 out there. So let's hear your views on that when we do go into questions and answers. And I think it's a really interesting approach to drawing attention right to this globally again. So thank you for that in this this important 2024 anniversary year. Mohammed, now back to you again. How do you think this ESG moment links to anti-corruption? To what extent do you think ESG is going to be able to help us future-proof business and really create businesses that can commit to zero corruption?
Can you hear?
Yeah.
Okay. First, let me touch on I briefly touch on the reporting part. Okay? The reporting part is very key, because people have to know what you're doing, all right? Now, why the reporting part has become so important? Number one, corporate sustainability reports being demanded. If you want to do business, people want to know what you're doing. So that is the first factor. So the standards that we are talking about requires this reporting. Second thing, when you have this reporting, it's not only about managing risk, but to create the dialogue. We spoke here about, just now we heard about engaging with stakeholders and so on, both internally and externally. Now, without having this report, people do not know what you're doing, okay? So to create that dialogue you need. Now, the third factor is, while you have this report, they must be robust, something affordable. At the same time, it must be followed up with audits and so on. So you need these reporting standards to be established. I mentioned just now, Global Compact, when it first came with their 10 principles, followed by the GRI, and then you had these private entities, coming out with their own index and so on. And lately, the European Financial Reporting Advisory Group, EFRAG, they have come up with the ESRS, European Sustainability Reporting Standards. Now, that is also very comprehensive, I would say. But at the same time, under this report, you have various stages, both for E, 5 topics, and 4 topics on S, and 1 the G. So it's quite comprehensive over there and so on. And the beauty of the EFRS is that it looks at double materiality, all right? In other words, how does it affect not only your internal organization, but also how does the how does you as an organization impact the environment and the social factors outside of the organization. So that also come into play. And also under the ESRS, third-party assurance is needed. Okay, so that is a very important factor. You're not just reporting, but it has to be verified. And the fourth factor that important is reporting mechanism, where it has a mechanism whereby it's going to be seamless. In other words, financial reporting and ESG reporting can be integrated into one report. So that's a good thing about it. And it also covers the entire value chain. So these are the beauty of all these standards that we have. So, but as I mentioned earlier, the problem is we have different standards, and for investors or analysts, it becomes very difficult to compare. Sometimes they can't even compare. It varies from industry to industry or from company to company. So I think what we need is, even though, as I said, the SRS is a good system from a European perspective, but the thing is, we need to sell this to even the East. You know, people in Asia, people everywhere have to have. So we need to have one standard for this. Now, in terms of how this will ultimately be ESG-related efforts will ultimately be a future proof of business. Now look, whatever we can say, as I said, the ESG is not something new. The E was always there. If you fail to protect the environment, depending on which jurisdictions you are, you will get penalized for that. Similarly for S, you know, human rights, sexual harassment, and so on. And the G also was there. But today it has all been put there. And I think for us to have a foolproof kind of business, it is a continuous improvement. As business is very dynamic, what is applicable last year, today is no longer applicable. So we need to constantly change, constantly look at new ways and innovation and so on. Now the other thing also I have to mention, just now at the plenary session an hour ago, they talked about beneficial ownership. Now this is another area that in ESG, it should be there. In fact, interestingly, when the ESRS was drafted, beneficial ownership was actually there. But because of the pushback from industry players and the stakeholders, this was removed. So I think that is an area where we have to continuously harp on it, and I think to push for it so that BO can also be included inside. So in a nutshell, as part of ESG-related efforts to have a foolproof business, it has to be constantly be looked at. All the time we have to look at new things. Year by year we have to review and constantly improve. So it's not something that you're going to stop and say it's finished. It has to be improved continuously.
Thank you so much for reflecting on both those opportunities and challenges related to reporting. I think I'd like to go to the floor and bring some energy from you for your questions. And we'll come back to the panel maybe for a last round just as we close. So I think there'll be a roving mic. And Daniel, you have the first question. First, can I ask for a round of applause for the panelists? Thank you all very much. Daniel.
Thanks very much, Robin, and thank you to the panel also for some great comments. My name is Daniel Milan. I'm from Trinity College Dublin. And I have a question about the G in ESG. I think Rana made it clear in his opening comments that we live in an ESG world, whether we like it or not. It's so comprehensive, I would argue, that for any public or private sector organization, it's really hard to think of anything that doesn't fit neatly into either an E or an S and a G. The E and the S are easier in terms of linking it back to sustainability and the triple bottom line. The E is planet, the S is people, but the G is a bit more difficult because on the one hand we have the governance definition of directing and control that puts it squarely in the domain of the board of directors or the governing body, but then there's also a more loosely phrased definition of governance that's all about dotted lines in the organization, accountability in committees, etc. And I think that is really important, to have clarity on the G, because that also feeds back again to the E and the S, specifically with reference to integrity. That does have an impact on the climate environment in terms of stewardship, or the S in terms of dignity and inclusivity. So my question to the panel really would be if they could give us the elevator pitch, to complete the sentence, the G in ESG refers to, how would they respond to that?
While you all think about that, maybe we'll take a second question. Over here, please. Thank you. And if you could, as Daniel did so well, introduce yourself and your organization. Thanks.
Thank you very much for the arrangement. My name is Xiongnian Yang from Taiwan. I'm working on Taiwan, TI Taiwan, also professor at university. Okay, I have two questions. The first question is, well, I totally agree all your explanation and statement. I think it's extremely well. But who should initiate that kind of a project? The second question is that was there a model? I mean, the model means that a specific company that really want to do this. Was there a successful story? Make it simple. Was there a kind of a example out there that, or potential example? You don't have to give me the exact kind of company, but you need to share with me the sure have, because right now I couldn't find a specific example that really implemented and tell us that it is very well. This kind of proved the evidence. Okay, this is my question. Thank you very much.
I didn't get the first question.
How should you initiate this kind of work? And are there examples out there that were role models? Does anybody want to step in either on the G in ESG is? Christina.
Well, my answer is longer than that. But basically, I want to mention something really important that we're doing at the UN Global Compact. So for governance, there are a lot of materials out there, and among them, there's this really good publication that was issued 10 years ago on anti-corruption programs of ethics and compliance. This was mandated by the G20 to the OECD, the World Bank, and UNODC, and they came up with this practical guidance with the 12 elements of a compliance program's governance, meaning the risk assessment, the tone from the top, the policies, general commitment, but also for special risk areas, training, communication, incentives, internal controls, addressing violations, reporting channels, whistleblower protection, monitoring, and evaluation. Pretty much those are the governance elements that we all know and we work with. But today, because of the momentum that I mentioned earlier, because of the resolution now that will promote incentives for business integrity all over the world, now is a good moment for us to revise that publication that was issued 10 years ago and to re-ask ourselves, okay, so what is business integrity today? Those elements, that publication doesn't mention sustainability, inclusivity, diversity, artificial intelligence, none of that. So the elements remain very much valid, the same, but we need to look at it through the transformational governance lens. So hopefully next year we'll have a standard for you to use with the specific elements of governance that will make it easier for us to know exactly what we're talking about, how to assess the impact of our programs, which is the hardest part in the end. It's the hardest part to quantify our corruption efforts, I would say, and maybe that was your question all about. And maybe I'll let someone else speak, but I also have a company in mind for the second question.
Go ahead, yes, please.
I think to address Daniel's question is, you see, I again reflect back for me. 37 years ago, when I started work, and now I think back when I hear about ESG, sustainability, I say, wait a minute, we were doing all this. We were told about this. even at that time when I was working, we always talk about shareholders. My boss used to tell me, you are here to make money for the shareholders. We hardly talk about stakeholders. The word stakeholders never even came. We only learned that word later on, myself. So I think the issue here is when you talk about the G, actually G covers the whole spectrum. Like what Christina says, there was this document that came out 10 years ago. In fact, all those things that she listed, whistleblower, compliance, don't break the laws, it's already there. It's just that the G part is actually covering all angles. So I think for organizations, I think to get this going, because of the momentum, like what Christina says, is already there, let's go back to those things, those principles or whatever that is in that document to actually implement. But I think the message that we have to send to the whole entire organization is that without the G, you don't have the E or a S, or you can't manage the E and the S. Some people have said that, instead of calling ESG, it should be GES. The governance comes first, then environment and social. So the governance, when you talk about governance, is actually the umbrella, the whole thing to it. I think that is a message that the board itself, and this is what I missed talking just now, when you talk about culture of integrity, the key message I want to get to you is the board. The tone at the top should be there. If the board doesn't support, the chair doesn't support, the CEO doesn't support, it's very difficult to implement. Many of you are from compliance or integrity or governance unit. You know what I'm talking about. So without the top support, it's going to be very difficult. So that's what I just want to add. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will be.
So
Nicola, then Rano.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, because now I have the opportunity to explain my job title. She said that it's too long. But first of all, I would add another point of view. And in corporations, performance is function of integrity, resilience, and quality. So for me, G refers to business integrity. That means that I follow the rules not just because I have to do it, but because I am convinced and I am responsible for following the rules. Resilience, business resilience, means that a corporation is able to adapt to the volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world, but is also able to make things happen. So business continuity, supply chain stabilization, cyber risk monitoring is G, but is also quality. In terms of standards, of course, we have to put in place processes aligned to the best standards, but in terms also of efficiency and velocity of processes. That is what CEO asks. So G means also process more efficient, not only more controlled. And just to answer where we do initiate, we have to break biases, and we will initiate when we will have a CEO coming from compliance. We will initiate when at the university in engineering program they have mandatory courses for responsible business conduct, for business integrity. I don't know if in your countries it's like this, but in Italy this does not happen. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I would just and Daniel, I hope I do not read too much into your questions. For me, it was a little bit of a leading question. And I would probably translate this into, has the G received the recognition it deserves? And clearly no. For the reasons that my colleagues just mentioned, because the G for me is the enabler of a successful E and an S, irrespective what is below. Therefore the G is, and all the elements that Christina mentioned, they are universal. But the leadership and the culture, those are the elements, because they are relevant for all, irrespective of which topic. But the G is for me also, a matter of mindset. Have we thought about 10 years ago of AI? Probably not. Some tech people, but clearly not the business. So the G is a mindset to be open, to be honest, to look into things, emerging trends, and to take it serious, and also look into beyond the company, what you mentioned, the double materiality. And I wouldn't slow it. Sometimes, when it's about the reporting, and I go a little bit, off the record, but I think with the reporting, I see a big challenge that basically ESG just becomes a tick-the-box exercise, which is not. ESG is not reporting. The reporting is a consequence of ESG in order to validate performance, which is another area. But I will stop here.
Thank you so much. I want to push if anyone has an example or a case they want to mention. Yes, please.
Okay. To my friend from Taiwan, you said you're asking question whether there's any success stories and so on. I have one case. I'm not at liberty to mention the name of the company, but it's an SME. Now, SMEs, when you talk about ESG, want to roll out, the bigger companies, we are very they when you tell them that this is the consequences and so on. The board doesn't want to take the risk. So they are prepared to give you the resources, prepared to give you the funds to roll out the ESG programs and compliance and so on. But the biggest challenge is the SMEs, the smaller companies. Please remember, for SMEs, cost is an important element. For a staff of 100 or 200, survival is important. So when you talk to them about additional costs and so on, they are out of this. One success story, which from Malaysia, this small little company, they have actually been supported by UN Global Compact, actually. They engage with them. And one of the good things about this company is that they prove. Who says that you can do good business without doing good business by bribing? Their argument is without bribing they can be successful. Okay, so they showed, they demonstrated, and because they subscribe to this, they are smaller in setup. Their argument is easier to train people, less cost, because not many people. So when you start early stage before your company becomes big, that's an advantage. And mind you, this company, they do boxes. Carton boxes for fast-moving consumer products. They do printing, making printing books and so on. And even Disneyland in the US give an order. That means they procure products from them, a small SME somewhere in outskirts of Kuala Lumpur. So for them to achieve that, I'm sure Disneyland has done all kind of audits and so on for these people. So that is a success story, I can say, that when you subscribe and you do small, you can be successful. But you've got to start somewhere. But again, the commitment from the top is important. If you don't have the commitment from the owner, in this case SME, the chair and the CEO is the same person. He's the owner himself. But because he believed in it, and he felt that this is good in the long run, because the bigger companies, if you want to approach them, if you don't have all this in place, they're not going to work with you. So he saw this at a very early stage. And this is one success story I can say. And he proved to us. He said, look at my revenue, except 2020, because of COVID, his revenue dropped and profits dropped. Otherwise, profits keep going up. So who says that you have to bribe people to get business? Do clean business? Yes, sometimes you get challenges, but you face and move across. So that is one example I can give you from Malaysia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Christina, very quickly an example?
Okay, an example from my country. And one example that I think is very relevant because it's a sort of state-owned enterprise, which makes it even harder. The Panama Canal Authority. And I don't even know how to start analyzing this case because, there's a lot of saying about corruption when, it's endemic, it's our culture, we're like this, it's never going to change. So that is kind of sometimes the mindset that we have in some places. In the case of Panama, the canal is a government-owned, autonomous corporation. But you can see the difference. Government has corruption scandals all the time, all governments. You may have heard of a little scandal called the Panama Papers. Whereas the Panama Canal is managed so well. Like, I don't even remember 3 corruption cases or one in all its history. So I think it comes back to a little bit of the happy part. Why? Because the perception you have, this is something that I studied when I studied anti-corruption, the perception you have of a company or the public sector is so important. It will influence the corruption environment. Because if people want to be a part of that company or that institution, because not only because the salaries are good, like you said, but there's a culture of integrity, maybe it has a great reputation, maybe the recruitment processes are strict, so only the best get to be there. You don't want to lose your job. You're happy there. You have, yes, the salary, but so many other things. In the end, you kind of want to keep your job. So you're less vulnerable to corruption, and there are studies that prove that. But second, strong institutional frameworks. Together with the tone from the top, you need to have your processes in place, and it comes to governance again. If someone commits corruption, you need to address it. You can't keep that person there. Your recruitment process, you need to be strong based on meritocracy. Your procurement, you need to have also standards, processes that are fair, that are objective, that are pre-established. When you have all of that, I believe 100% that is when you can really fight corruption or mitigate it a lot. Like, okay, maybe you won't ever be able to 100% prevent it, but if you have the strong institutional framework in place, it's multi-sectoral. You need prevention, but also you need enforcement. And we can see that, at least in Panama.
Okay. Now, I just want to create some opportunity for another question or two, and then we will wrap up. But thank you for those great examples from SMEs and also from a state-owned enterprise. Kaunen, you need a mic. And please, if you could keep your questions brief so that we can get a couple in.
It's not a question, Kunen Rahman from Transparency International, but a quick comment which answers all of the questions that you all sort of spoke about today. Transparency International has come out with a resource, which Robin will also share later. It actually looks at ESG and anti-corruption and basically looks at the incentives, disincentives, looks at how does ESG reporting actually impact anti-corruption behavior on the ground, and also sort of maps out the mandatory framework for ESG reporting, especially ESRS G1 on business conduct. So to answer your question on ESG reporting impacting behavior, on how governance plays out in this space, it would be nice to look at that. But
intervention allowed, given all the work you did to get us here. Kaunen, can you pass the mic, though, back in the few rows back? Thank you. And anyone else have a question? There's one more. There's two more. Okay, we'll take those quickly, please.
Hello, my name is Martin. I come from the Maritime Anti-Corruption Network, and as we have briefly touched upon, it's a jungle of various reporting metrics that you can touch upon, or standards. Some of them, they focus on risk exposure for the organization. Other go into what have you actually put in for the organization. An example could be the new ESRS, for example, where you have to report on confirmed incidents of corruption. In a sense, the fact that you find confirmed incidents of corruption could also just be the result of a very strong internal controls, which would be good for a mature company with a good governance framework. Is there any missing metrics that could actually show and reward good governance structures where it could show it more than what it does today with the current metrics that we have?
Thank you. An interesting question around metrics, positive metrics driving good behavior. There were two more questions, please. The gentleman, okay, after you, then the gentleman. Yeah.
Hi there. My name is Yeva. I'm from Deloitte UK. As part of my work, I was also kind of working on a pitch for ESG and compliance and forensic accounting. And we did kind of encounter issues with ESG compliance, whether we do have kind of regulations, strict regulations about ESG. One of it was that ESG is covering quite a large spectrum of issues, from environment to corporate governance and social issues and you know, all sorts of topics that you obviously know. How would you see that, whether, you know, the future of ESG, whether the regulations will be stricter, and how would the regulators, in your opinion, would look at companies, for example, that, let's say, have perfect governance, gender equality in their boards, but are polluting, for example, or vice versa, right? How would regulators and legislations would look into whether this company would be compliant or not?
Thank you. Dissonance in ESG. Yes, please.
I'm Professor Vicha Mahakun from Thailand. I'm former National Anti-Corruption Commissioner. Also, I'm very interesting in the environment. I think that it must have the anti-green corruption or the environmental corruption. And only the program of the preventive is not enough.
Okay.
I think that the way under the law now, Australia and Singapore straight in the report, it's the duty of the audit, not only audit in the financial, must audit in the environmental of the organization also. That I think that I would like to know that how we try to push it in the law, not only soft law like ethical conduct. It must be hard law also. Thank you.
Okay, so questions around the future of hard law, the broader future of ESG, dissonance or inconsistencies across the ESG profile. Who would like to take a last word as well as try to answer those? And then I would welcome you to perhaps follow up on your questions here in front with the panelists if you didn't get your answer, because they have about 45 seconds each. So we'll start with Christina.
So I will take the first one real quick. I will just copy the answer of Alexei, who's sitting right there, who gave a good response to a similar question this morning about metrics, what key or good metrics we can use to assess a program. And I would say, because I very much agree, the number of reports that we receive and how they are handled in the company, because that shows, as Alexei was explaining, the level of trust, of credibility of your reporting system. So I think reporting channels, whistleblower protection, for me that was an excellent response, and we could work on the metrics right there.
Thank you, Christina, and I'm sorry to be so tough as a moderator, but I will now go to Rano.
I can quickly also respond to this. I do not know what was the response, but when it comes to reporting misconduct, we need to be very careful, because the number, as you know, are not reliable. Because what we are missing is the reference point of real misconduct. What we only know is if someone spoke up. But the environment in which someone speaks up is dynamic. So if you launch a communication, whistleblowers are protected, immediately you have more reports. If you narrow the scope, immediately you have less reports. So the number of the misconduct reporting doesn't tell you whether you really have an issue or not, or whether basically your framework is working or not. And that's the same issue because many companies use the benchmarking. They basically look, okay, similar to multinational, how much reporting they have, because we have a lack of reliable information. It's difficult, it's not comparable because you do not know the setting. What I can promote, work of Transparency International. They issued 2015 a very nice report, TI Denmark, who basically looked into the different areas: reliability, trust of the system, reliability, trust of the organization, 3 different areas, and they very nicely outlined different parameters that you could use. I would make this as a recommendation for you to look into.
We have now hit the time, but I am going to cheekily ask my panelists to wrap up. 30 seconds to you, Nicola, on metrics or green corruption. How are we measuring?
Okay, on green corruption, I said at the beginning that it's a priority of the B20 Integrity Compliance Task Force. So we addressed all the priorities in 3 main recommendations and 6 policy actions. So you can check the outlook in the papers. So, and if you give me your details, I will be more than happy to send it to you. And regarding the outlook, I would like just to end with the 3 sentences. It's on, it's us, it's a must. It's on because the revolution is already happening. It's us, only together can we make it happen. It's a must because we do not have plan B. Thank you.
Thank you for that inspiring end. Mohammed, you're wrapping us up here.
Okay. Just to address Martin's question, because we didn't have much time just now. Under the ESRS G1, there are 6 subsections, whereby under this standard, you have to report for conviction cases for corruption, number of how much fines you have paid, political influence, lobbying, and what are the preventive measures for and detection for corruption and bribery. So these are all there. It's a very good standard. But the thing is, it's ESRS. See? Globally, we need one standard. So that's what we hope will happen. In closing, I would just say that we have talked here, but I think the issue of tone at the top is very crucial. Many of you come from compliance and so on. I think convincing the board and asking them to lead is key for ESG success. Without that, it's going to be very difficult. So I hope that can happen. Thank you.
It's been a really rich conversation. My excellent organizers have asked me, nevertheless, to point to 2 more things. First, the study that Kaunan mentioned, we'll get to that in a second, but also that the UNGC has been nominated for collective action awards at the Basel Institute in their upcoming awards 2024, and they are asking us for their vote, so please take a picture, and no pressure, but we'd certainly welcome your support of UNGC and acknowledgement of their good work. I can't sum up this conversation. My experience of the G is, Daniel, as you pointed to, fundamental to everything that's happening inside the company, that's changing inside economics and the economy right now. And sometimes I think we have this big G that supports everything, and we've got then the small g, which are the issues that we work on all the time in terms of compliance. But this big G is integrity, it's inclusion, it's how a company leads and demonstrates who it is for its staff, for its customers, for the societies it works in. It's critically important for the future. I will put up the study as well. Thank you, Kaunan, for all the work that TI has done and is doing. And I wanted to end on a note of a quote by Warren Buffett, the maverick investor that we all know. And this is attributed to him. He said, if you're looking for people to hire, you look for 3 qualities: integrity, intelligence, and energy. And if they don't have the first one, the integrity, the other 2 will kill your business. So we'll end there. Thank you very much.